Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sharif Bey, and it is my distinct pleasure to introduce these two wonderful art educators. This is a little bit of a heartfelt introduction for me because I've been fortunate to work with Lily Toman and Danielle Ruggiero for many, many years. They both did their undergraduate and graduate educations in art education under my watchful eye. So to think that they're now art teachers in their own right, changing the world one lesson plan at a time, is really something to me, because I feel like I kind of seen them grow up. So I was trying to kind of encapsulate on my drive here how I would frame this, and I was like, are they my family? Are they like my art education nieces? Or are they? I really did not have the words to describe the connection that we feel, but I know that I know what their comfort foods are. We've shared lots and lots of laughter over the last, I don't know, 6, 8 years. And I know it's peanut butter for Lily and chocolate for Danielle. So it's kind of like they're like Reese's, right? So, but anyway, I could not encapsulate it. So I just want to say that they're two strong women who I have deep love, appreciation, and admiration for. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Collaborations Through Clay with Lily Toman from New Jersey, up northern New Jersey, and Danielle Ruggiero from central New York.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Bey. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, great. Thank you, Dr. Bey. We're really, really touched that you were able to introduce us and be part of our collaboration, and we would not be presenting without you, so thank you. And thank you to everybody for coming. We are going to be asking you a few questions and asking you to kind of talk to people around you. So if you're sitting kind of to the side, or if you want to come closer, we'd love to make eye contact with you and make you feel uncomfortable. So yeah, go ahead, Lily.
Okay. So I just want to give you a little bit of background on Danielle and I. We're obviously presenting on collaboration, and Danielle and I met when Danielle's a year older than me, and we met when we were both in undergrad, and her group of friends kind of took me under their wing, and we flourished. But Danielle and I have been collaborating together for many years. A lot of our collaboration starts on the couch under a furry blanket, and we talk about our lives, and then about an hour later we're talking about all these cool projects that we're doing in class, because we share this passion of art, clay, collaboration, students. And so we have been teaching, Danielle's been teaching for 4 years, I've been teaching for 2 years, and we really throughout this PowerPoint want to share with you how we use collaboration in our classrooms, how we use it in our daily lives, and how clay, being such a tactile material, can really, really be a great, great material for you to bring that collaboration into the classroom.
So as Lily said, I'm in my 4th year teaching. I teach grades K through 6 at 2 public schools. I did my undergrad work, as Dr. Bey said, at Syracuse University in art education, as well as focus in sculpture and ceramics. And Lily?
I am a 2nd year teacher at an independent school, also in Syracuse. I teach pre-K through 12, but I do not teach 6th or 8th grade. So I teach pre-K through 5, 7th grade, and then I teach yearbook, ceramics, and mixed media in the high school. And I got my BFA in art education with a focus in 2D, and I got my master's in art education with a focus in ceramics.
So the first thing we want to ask you guys is, what is collaboration? So the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the word collaboration, what are you thinking? What does it mean to you? How have you used it in your classroom or your art practice? So we're going to ask that you turn and talk to somebody nearby, and for about a minute, we just want you to talk about collaboration and what it means. Go ahead.
Hey, Lily. I'm glad they did it. If I were out there in the audience, I would just literally be sitting looking away from it. I literally
Everybody needs to
lean forward. Like up here, no idea what we're doing. I started talking about it. I was like, oh my god, what am I supposed to say right now? What do I do? And I looked at you and I was like, what do I press? And no one said move closer to the microphone.
All right.
Did Dr. Lee? He's all the way in the back with his wife.
Oh my god. 10-second warning. Well, we're gonna move it along. What is this guy gonna tell us? Yeah. Okay. All right. So thank you so much for collaborating with each other. So would anybody like to share something that you thought of or that your partner thought of under the umbrella of collaboration? And you can shout out if you would like. Yeah.
I was mentioning that I would collaborate a lot more naturally when I would teach other disciplines like graphic design or traditional arts, but for some reason, in my sculpture and ceramics classes, I haven't done as much collaboration out into other disciplines. And we were discussing because of the time being so precious and the projects or the work taking so much of that we just want to protect it and do everything that we just want to do with our own little worlds.
Yeah, absolutely. So you bring up a great point. So sometimes it could be easier to collaborate in other mediums, like drawing or design, as you mentioned. That's awesome. And you mentioned bringing in other subject areas. That's something we're definitely going to touch on. Anybody else? Yeah.
We talked about how our collaboration, the results are better than what we already could have done separately.
Okay, so how collaboration kind of pushes people to a result they didn't expect or can be even better than they anticipated. Anybody else?
Addie and I talked about the collaboration between student and teacher, and then teacher collaboration.
Okay, so how are we collaborating with people, right? Teacher to student, teacher to teacher. That's a really important part. And maybe we could have one more comment? Yeah.
I am a high school ceramic teacher, 9 through 12, and I get like 38 students per class. But I find that like each hour I'm teaching, a lot of their work starts to like morph into like the same type of thing in that class. Like I'll have one class and like all of a sudden like everything they're doing in there has to do with like turtles. Another class, like everything they're doing has to do with like acorns.
Wow.
So, sometimes I feel like if I could try to get collaboration, even just within ceramics, between different hours that I teach, that they would gain different perspectives on their work and maybe not quite run the same track.
Yeah, so we're always trying to find ways, right, to make students or encourage them to, come up with their own ideas and make something unique and meaningful and personal. So having a variety of work is something that can come out of collaboration. That's great. So the way we're gonna do this is we're gonna share several lessons that we've each done with our students, and we're going in order of grade level. But we really want to emphasize that you can take these ideas and do it with any age group. One of the lessons I'm actually going to share, a friend in the audience, Maria Spies, has done the project with her Intro to Ceramics class at Syracuse University. So, take what you can from it and remember, and we can help you apply it to other grades or, anything we can do to support you. So Lily's going to first share a third grade lesson.
Okay, so this I've been doing about, I think this was the third year that I did it. In the first year that I did it, I was a student teacher. So if there are any New York State student teachers out there, this is what I did for my EdTPA. So if you need to talk about EdTPA, I am here for you. It is a long journey, but we will get through it. So this is a really, really fun, I call it sculptural vessel project, and it's third grade. We look at all sorts of different materials to try to understand kind of what what is the world, right? Kids love to explore. Third grade is a really, really fun age where they're still asking tons and tons of questions, but that sort of like pre-teen angst hasn't quite set in yet. So they're still willing to be like super imaginative and have lots of different inquiries. So this is a project where we look at the periodic table. We look at a book that NASA published called Earth as Art, where there are they take satellite pictures of different places of Earth, and you can't really tell what it is, except you have to use your skills of color, or what you know about color, texture, form, to deduce mountain ranges and water. And then we talk about the ancient Greek elements and what they thought the world was made up of. So this next slide is the power. I know it's really bright, but it's all the whole PowerPoint that I show the kids. So all the slides. So third graders have never. I feel like I'm shouting at you. Is everyone okay? So the third graders have never seen a periodic table before, but they've all heard of it, and it's really, really fun because all the third graders have somehow heard about matter and mass before this project. So they bring that prior knowledge into it. And then we talk about water and oxygen. They all know that we breathe oxygen. So we talk about breathing oxygen, and then we talk about water and helium and how do balloons float. So we start to see the world in little particles, right? We start to see the world scientifically. This year I actually had a daughter of a physicist at SU in the class, so she was able to kind of share what they talk about at the dinner table every night. And then we look at the NASA Earth as Art pictures, which I think to you are on the they're on the right of the screen. And they are like, their eyes just pop out of their head when these pictures come up. And they are able to say, this is a cloud, this is a mountain range, this is a glacier, just based on what they know about the basic principles of art. And then we talk about the classical Greek elements, fire, earth, air, and water, which they will probably never ever forget because I asked them like 5 times during every single class period. So then they take one of the elements, the Greek elements, and they take what they learned from the NASA Earth as Art about form, color, and texture, and they apply it to a sculptural vessel. And it's really fun to see them trust the process. I'm going to show you a 7th grade project where every step of the process they doubted not only their abilities, but my abilities as a teacher. So they are like, this 3rd grade, they're like, this is the coolest thing. It doesn't look right. That's fine. I trust that when it comes out of the kiln, it'll work, because they're just so involved with the process of the clay. So this is obviously on your hopefully left is Wales. So she's doing water, and they looked at what is in the water. And then on the left, he did fire. So more whales. She incorporated every element. There's always one kid in the class that just can't make up their minds, and so they finally ask, can I do all of them? This student chose to work on the inside as well. I purposely do not say you can or cannot do something. So I leave it up to that first student to make changes to the inside of their vessel. And then I say, let's look at what this student is doing to the inside of their vessel. And that light bulb starts to go off for the other students. There is a lot of planning that goes into this. The students do worksheets. It's the first time that I'm making them go sort of from a 2D idea into a 3D sculpture. So they have a paper template of a slab, and where they make marks with a pencil, they will carve out on the clay. And then they have extra paper, which would be an extra slab of clay, and they cut out what they would add to the sculpture. And then when they move on to the slabs of clay, they take off what they want to carve and trace it, cut it, and apply with score and slip. And then they look at their brainstorm of where the pencil was, and that's where they make their carving. So it's a really easy way for them to go from what they're very comfortable with on paper into this new 3D realm.
I love that technique, Lily. That wasn't on.
She loved that technique.
Yeah, I think that's such a smart way to introduce additive and subtractive techniques. So, to kind of continue on, my first project I'm going to share with you is a Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them lesson. So this was inspired, of course, by the amazing Harry Potter movie, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. So as I'm watching this movie in the theaters, all I can think is, okay, this is an art project about, coming up with a new creature. So I did this lesson with 5th graders who the year before, their teacher was also obsessed with Harry Potter. So they read the books, they watched the movies, so I knew they would instantly be engaged on top of already loving clay. So there are several collaborations with this project. The Literacy Connection, of course, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them is a book, so that's available in our library. It's also a movie. We listened to the Harry Potter score as they were working. Playing music in the classroom can definitely affect the atmosphere and the learning environment. And then at the end of the project, we did kind of a small group that got to go on a field trip to our high school, and our local ceramic store, Clayscapes Pottery, actually came and raku fired with the students. So I start this project by activating some prior knowledge, right? Some students have seen this movie, some have not, most did. So I show them this image of all the different creatures in the movie, and we watch the movie trailer. So basically the prompt for students is to come up with 2 animals and find a way to combine them. So here are some student samples. So we start each project with 2 pinch pots and slip and score them together. So that kind of makes the body. And then from there, they're adding different appendages and details. Personal favorite is on your right, the Delephant. So combining a deer and an elephant. So one of the challenges we had with this project was establishing airflow in the project, right? So if I have a hollow piece of clay in the kiln, it's probably going to explode. So we popped a little belly button in each piece. And then as they added the head, sometimes that was a big chunk of clay, so they either hollowed it out and created a hole so the air could go from the head to the body out the belly button. So we kind of had to think about that. That was a big new concept with this lesson, and students really, once I explained it, they're like, okay, she's telling me my piece is going to blow up in the kiln, I guess I'll listen to her. So that was kind of a new learning curve for us. At the end of the project, students wrote like a description. You might even see it like the zoo, right? So if you're looking at an exhibit at the zoo, what might it say about the animal? So they had to write about the habitat, the country of origin, the diet, fun facts about the animal. Then I had a small group of students that had the opportunity to do a special project with raku. So they did the same project, same animals, same prompt, came up with a different animal, of course, in their original, because no kid wants to make the same thing twice. And then we took this really great field trip, and they got to see the process of an atmospheric firing, which is drastically different than what we have in our electric kiln. And the results were really exciting. Students loved it. This was a really fantastic field trip. So another lesson I'm going to share with you was actually created by NCECA. For the 50th anniversary of NCECA, they created a K-12 challenge called Across the Table, Across the Land. And so I found this challenge on Facebook and decided to give it a try, and now it's actually become like a 6th grade tradition at our school. So basically, students choose a food, could be significant to them either culturally, personally, a food they have with their family, a food they have with their friends, or maybe a food that they don't like. And they have to create a ceramic vessel that will hold this food in an interesting and new way. There's a lot of collaboration with the 6th grade teachers. So we worked together during their English language arts class, where the students were writing personal narratives about their food and their plan for their project. We also documented the process. That was one of the parameters that NCECA established. So we had iPads, we're taking process photos. And then there was a culinary collaboration because all the students brought their food in to school. And in the end, we had a big lunch party and everybody ate off of their piece. So we start by planning some ideas and brainstorming. So the first thing they do is, pick a food. Okay, cereal. How do you usually eat this food? And the amount of people that wrote like a plastic cup or a styrofoam bowl, right, really not very enchanting objects. So they were very engaged to come up with a new object to eat out of. So here's some process photos. These are 6th graders, so I give them a lot of freedom here. They are my students from the time they're in kindergarten till the time they go to middle school. So they've got a lot of information. They know how to slab build, they know how to coil. So they have a lot of freedom and can kind of come up with their own ideas. The piece on the left is for a quesadilla, and she was making all the little holes for the different toppings. It was pretty cute. So these are some of the finished pieces. They're super playful, so fun. And when you put the food with them, I just think they really pop and are really special. And I found it so interesting how they all like to compartmentalize their foods and separate things. And so here we are. This is my whole 6th grade. And they just love this. Many of them don't eat off of handmade objects. And that was a big part of the NCECA challenge, was how does food and ceramics bring us together as a community. So the writing that we did throughout this lesson was done on Google Classroom. If you are not familiar with Google Classroom, it's really easy, and it's a great way to have students writing and reflecting on your different prompts that you can create. And then you can see right away who's done and not done. You can click, you can read their responses, you can edit their responses, you can write comments. So that's how we created our written narratives about this piece. This is the sushi roll platter. That was amazing. A student created a platter, and he cut out different Japanese islands and slip and scored them onto the platter, and then he arranged his sushi around them. So that was pretty cute. And then this piece here was actually juried into the Across the Table, Across the Land show, and we call it the Cookie Monster mug. And in the mouth, you can actually put the cookies, and then in the mug, you can have your hot chocolate or milk. And this show was like amazing because you have something like Cookie Monster mug, and then you have Margaret Bowles over there, like with her amazing work. So it really collaborated between young budding artists and really established contemporary artists. So this next project I'll share with you is a ceramic totem pole. So students visually represented ideas and feelings through ceramic totem pole sculpture. So this, the first collaboration here is with our Common Core standards with social studies. So in New York State, 4th grade curriculum is to learn about Native Americans. So we started there, right? They're in 6th grade, so they have a little background knowledge. And we talk about the traditions of totem poles and the practice of storytelling and handing down, passing these stories down and sharing them with the community. We did a lot of writing. And then in the end, we used technology. We used an app called Flipgrid, which is super cool. My librarian shared it with me. And basically, they can make a little video. And they talked about each part of their totem pole. And then they can share it with the class. And you can watch each other's videos. You can comment. So that was a really great resource. So the first thing we did was planning. I think you can tell Lily and I like to have this phase of our projects, right? Because if a student wants to make something and I don't know what is in their brain, I feel like I can't help them. So for me, it helps to have them sketch so I can see what they want to make, and then I can say, oh, well, we can do it this way or this way. So another big component was the math behind the totem pole. So each totem pole was supposed to be 18 inches tall. So that means if I'm going to make 6 sculptures, how big are they each going to be so they can all fit on the totem pole? So I do a lot of running around the room and try to help everybody figure it out. And, you know, we're using rulers, we're using slabs. And one of the things that I did for the first time and was like, I'm going to do this forever, is I made a quick video in like 5 minutes of myself doing the techniques that I showed students the day before. And then I just have it running on a loop. And so if a student is late or they miss class, I can say, okay, go watch the video and then come talk to me, and I'll help you from there. So the two methods that I kind of taught students, the first was to sculpt a piece, you know, just out of a chunk of clay. And so what they did is they had to cut it in half and hollow it out. I explained it as scooping out the guts. And then you can slip and score it back together. And then they had to put another dowel through the piece to make sure it could stack on the totem pole. The other option, which we found was much easier, is to, you know, cut a slab like the jack-o'-lantern and, you know, sculpt, and he did a little carving. And then on the back, you can create a little cylinder, which will also stack on the totem pole base. So students, you know, they had a few options, and anybody that was struggling immediately found more success with the slabs. And then here we are glazing. I give them a lot of choice with their glazes. We used teacher's palette mostly, so they could mix the colors. They could just use them out of the bottle. And I also had some crystal glazes too. So this is a picture of what the totem pole bases look like without the sculptures. So I made these, you know, I know this might sound like a lot, but it really wasn't too bad. So I took takeout containers and poured plaster in them, and then I put the dowel into the base once the plaster was setting up. So it was super quick and easy, and then students could just paint this with acrylic, and that was one of our lessons. So it's a lot of work, but really I think this was a quick and easy way to do it. And then here are some of the really fantastic outcomes. So every piece is really unique to the student. I love these. I just think they look like, they're like symbolic self-portraits. I think they're outstanding. And it was really fun because they wanted to incorporate other materials besides clay. So we have like the Starbucks straw and everything. And then in this piece, the student put like a paintbrush on the art palette. And then the piece that's below that, kind of horizontal, is a torch for Survivor. And she used like cellophane to make the fire. And then the other piece on the top has a lacrosse stick. So we hot glued string to create that kind of effect. And we just had a blast doing this, so it was really fun. To kind of wrap up the project, we did some written reflections, and I had created an assessment where students, you know, could explain their additive techniques, subtractive techniques, and texture techniques. And then we used the Flipgrid app, which was so much fun. They really loved this. They definitely enjoyed this more than the writing. So you could even offer like an option if students want to write and they don't want to be on video, they can do that. If they prefer to be on video than writing, they could do that. So kind of giving them more voice and choice. And now Lily's going to share this amazing lesson.
So this lesson that I'm going to share is a 7th grade lesson. And I have a very different dynamic going right now with my students. This is only my 2nd year teaching at the school. The school has gone through a lot of transitions recently when it comes to art teachers. And for some of my 7th graders, they have never worked in clay, ever. And if they have worked in clay, they've never worked in slab. The year before they had me, they did coil pots. But for some of them, clay was a totally new world and environment. I also am, I spend a lot of time, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse, with the 7th grade. I have a group of advisees that stay with me for 40 minutes during the day, and then I also teach them. So this project was sort of a growth from something I saw in the classroom. from our previous art project, and then a hobby that I noticed everyone was doing. So we start the year off in 7th grade doing alter egos, and it's just a fun way to get to know students. And I realized that no one really knew how to use a ruler in 7th grade and to measure. And I thought that this might cause some problems later on in life. So we made cubes, because you have to measure when you make squares. It's just a thing that has to happen. And I also noticed that my students were obsessed with Rubik's cubes. I was constantly confiscating them. I had a collection going in my drawer. So I decided we were going to make puzzle cubes to practice our measurements. They'd been begging to do clay, and now they have this obsession with puzzles. So I am pretty open-ended in my projects. I give them a prompt, and then they are allowed to go from there. So this was the first project that I kind of put my foot down and said, you have to make a 4-inch by 4-inch square. And just that parameter on the students was like, oh my gosh, what happened to Miss Tillman? She gave us like a hard and fast rule, 4 inches by 4 inches. So it took them a little time to be okay with me kind of saying, these are the parameters, and you kind of have to work inside that cube. Get it? Okay. So the collaboration was obviously math and measurement, planning, a lot of 3D planning, and then design, and you'll see that in a little while. So students, I encouraged them to make a puzzle and to hide pieces of their puzzle. So they made their cubes. They made 4 slabs, and then they put the 4 slabs onto another slab of clay and measured that square. So it wasn't a perfect 4-inch by 4-inch cube. And then their challenge was, when they put a design on their clay, to mask the pieces of the clay that were the puzzle. So here, obviously, we have a flower, and then in the negative space, the pieces that she cut out were in the negative space, so you can't really tell. So there's a piece at the top, there's a piece at the side, there's a piece in the corner. She chose a very kind of organic, nature-y influence. This girl decided to do something more geometric. This was also the first project that I made them take responsibility for from step 1. So the first day of class, I said, if your project dies, it is not my fault. You have to make sure it doesn't dry out. You have to make sure it doesn't get crushed by something. You have to make sure you don't leave it out. With a 7th grader, you have to make sure you don't forget where you put it, because I don't know where you put it. And that was a very eye-opening experience for them. We had at least 3 cubes dry out and had to start over. We had 1 cube that was never found. We had 1 cube that was accidentally stolen. So it was interesting to see them navigate the art room without me, basically. So they really, what was beautiful in the end through all that struggle was, this is their piece of artwork. This was their child, and some of them had to do it 2 or 3 times. So when they saw their final piece, it was huge for them. And for some of them, it was the first time that I got any sort of connection from them when it came to art. They wanted to come to art to see what was going to happen that day with their cube, because it was kind of an unknown for them. So this project also, we ran into a lot of problems, and they had to problem solve for themselves. So if it's too wet, I can't cut today. So what am I going to do? If it's too dry, how do I rehydrate it? I also trusted my 7th grade with knives. They cut out each piece when it was at the leather hard stage with a very thin box cutter. And one of the questions that I got at the beginning of this project was, can we cut out a piece anywhere on the cube? And my answer was, there's only a few places you can cut on the cube. It either has to be from a corner or from a side. Because if you cut in the middle of a slab, that you can't get that piece in and out. The other thing that students were finding was, if they cut their pieces out and they were too wet and they let them dry, they would stick together. So they had to be very careful with their drying period or process. And I also, when I bisque fired them, I bisque fired all the pieces together so that they would shrink at the same rate and fit perfectly together. And then when they were glazed, I did fire them separately, and people who were very precise about their measurements and cutting, their cube was fine. And other students who rushed through the process or struggled a little bit more, their pieces didn't fit perfectly together and we had to do some sanding. But it was very interesting to see students approach this in all sorts of different ways. There was no parameters on what they could do to their surface. I had a lot of students with varying physical abilities, and for students who could not make the cube, they made sgraffito tiles, and we still practiced our measurement, and they were able to put any sort of design onto their tiles. And that was also the case for someone it was like the third time they let their cube dry out, and we said, we're doing tiles. So this one was cool. She was one of the only students who cut hers in half. In our examples that we looked at, that was one of the options, but it seemed to scare a lot of students to quote unquote destroy their cube, even though they're not destroying their cube. You know, it's a puzzle cube. They're going to put it back together, but it was really hard for them to make that first cut into this cube that they had just slaved over to make perfect. And this student he struggled. He really, really struggled with this project. This is a student who is not used to struggling in a classroom, and he's very good at art. He works really hard. You know, what he might lack in talent, he makes up with spending hours or, you know, inside the art room. And it seemed like every step of the way that he made this cube, something broke or something dried out, and it wasn't his fault. Like, he came and he took care of it. He nurtured it. He loved this cube. And he problem solved through every single step of the way. And I think in the art room, that's really, really, really important. You know, we give our students, if you're a teacher, we give our students a lot of freedom, right? And sometimes it's hard for those students to navigate freedom. And I mean, I just went to a lecture where we were talking about freedom versus kind of like regulations. And when you give them freedom, they beg for regulations. And then when you give them regulations, they beg for freedom. So it's really hard for them to kind of navigate that world. And he, you know, would ask for help, and I would give him some suggestions, and he would sit down and he would say to himself, what am I going to do? I also have this rule that we're not allowed to say I can't. We have to use a different language. So if he does come to me and say, I can't do this, he has to take an art oath, and no one in my classroom wants to take the art oath. So it was a really good learning experience for him to learn how to problem solve. So this cube, which is amazing, is supposed to fit together. That piece is supposed to go all the way down. And when he got out of the kiln and it didn't go all the way down, pretty sure there might have been a tear in his eye. And then he stepped back and he looked at it and he was like, this is totally different than anybody else's in the class. I said, yeah, it is. It's really cool. It plays with negative space. And when he stepped back and looked at this, he realized what an awesome job he had done. And for a lot of students, like I said, this was their first time with clay. And we teach all sorts of art. I mean, every material you can imagine, we teach it. But it's our love of clay that keeps coming us back to collaboration with other teachers and with other disciplines. And for some students, this was the first time that a material spoke to them. I taught my 7th grade how to wheel throw, and it was, for one student, the first time that he had like success in the classroom. And he walked around so tall and proud for the rest of the day. And that bowl that he made was really, really special to him. And he came up and said, this is going to be for my mom for her birthday, as long as she lets me eat my Special K out of it in the morning. So he was so attached to this. It meant something to him. He wanted to give it to his mom, but it still held him. And I think that's really important about clay and vessels. So after this project, we just talk about, you know, what is clay, and they take a quiz, and because it's important for them to know the technique so that they can sort of break the technique once they go on into other places. just a fun thing to do if you give quizzes is to put a little extra credit point there in the directions and see how many students actually read your directions. Out of a class of 32, I had about 5 students who actually read my directions on the quiz. So if they put a smiley face down at the bottom, they get an extra credit point. There's also a really easy, I don't remember the name of the website, but there's a really easy website. If you type in on Google, like, make a quiz for me, it's like the first one that pops up. But you put in all your definitions and all your questions, and it jumbles them up and makes a quiz for you, and then you just go and proofread and make sure there's not like 2 multiple choice questions that are too similar. So just a fun fact. Okay, so what are we up to now? Do you want me to just keep going? Okay, so I'll go do mine since I'm up here.
Mine is first in PowerPoint. Mine is first in the PowerPoint.
So you want to go? But you're just going to stand up there.
Okay,
And,
go ahead.
okay, we got this. All right, so just real quick, right now we are working on in 5th grade Stuff You Should Know T-sets, and this is a group project, and we look at a podcast called Stuff You Should Know, if any of you have heard of it. And then right now, the last half of the year, I just started teaching high school ceramics. So they are doing a project with a recycled vessel in nature, and then a project where they have to research 5 different artists and use the influence from the artists.
See, when Lily changes my routine, I react instead of respond. This is very representative of our teaching styles, where I need a list of things to do, and Lily's like free and organic about it. So I like learning from Lily's teaching style. So in my classroom right now, we've been working on mug rugs forever, it feels like. So I started teaching this year at 2 schools. And I'm going through, you know, the supply closet at the other school, and I find all these cardboard looms. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like, I've never, you know, really done a fibers lesson. I've only been teaching 4 years, and fibers isn't something I have really dove into. So I wanted to find a way to do a weaving project and then do something more, right? Okay, so you have this woven thing, what now? So students worked with a partner or a group of 3 to come up with a cohesive design between their rug and their mug. And so I wanted them to really think about how these objects can bring you together. So every morning I tell them the story. I'm like, I drink out of the same mug every morning. It's by Andrea Deniston, who went to school. We went to school together. I bought it at her thesis show, and I think of her every morning. So what are you going to think of when you use this mug that you just collaborated over? What is the conversation you're going to have at the end of this project? So, you know, they're working with a partner. We're collaborating with different materials. And then there's another culinary connection here where what are we going to serve in our mugs? What do we both like? So we are still weaving. It takes a while, but they absolutely love it. You know, the classroom is very relaxed. They just come in. They know what to do. I did see a cool little trick on Pinterest that you can have a popsicle stick tied to the end of the string and kind of use it as a needle, and it makes this process go a lot faster. So here are some sketches that the students started off with. Can you guys see that okay? Like, is it colorful? It doesn't look good on our screen. So this is an under the sea theme. So they had to plan, okay, what do we have in common? What do we all like? So this group of students is super excited about this project. And so they're going to use colors in their weaving that are under the sea, and then they're going to have little sculptures on the side of their mug when we get to that phase. This student that is creating like a lava mug. So his rug is like all red, and his mug is going to have like a volcano. And then his partner is doing like the ocean, because they were like, have you ever seen how lava goes into the ocean and then it makes an island? So they were really into that. A lot of science connections. So although each person creates an individual rug and an individual mug, the rugs are big enough that you can fit 2 cups on it. So it still has that collaboration where, you know, what are we going to talk about? We have our mugs and we're sitting here and we finally finished the project. So we're going to have kind of a guided discussion and share, you know, how the process went, how our product looks, and then kind of see each other's pieces, use our pieces. I love doing that in the classroom. Like having the kids to have that drink out of their mug is just so exciting.
So this is probably one of my favorite lessons that I've ever thought of. But so I recently started listening to this podcast called Stuff You Should Know. And one of the things that I miss the most about college is just like constantly learning and talking to people. And you have an idea and then it builds and it builds and it builds. And although I get that in the classroom, I just miss like randomly knowing facts. So I've been listening to this and I was like, this would be such a cool project to do, right? So the students came into class, and I am, in case you haven't noticed, I'm like super animated, and I'm like cracking all these bad jokes, and the students are like, wow, we must have a new project coming. So, you know, I'm like, yeah, we're going to do this tea set, and they're like, yay, clay, and I'm like, and we're going to do a research project, and they're like, Ms. Tolman, why? So we start the class, and I start talking about like, what do you wonder about, right? And so we have this whiteboard, and I start making a list of what do we wonder about. And it took the students a really long time to get out of like their school square, right? We're learning about the colonies. That's all we can talk about. So I started talking about the like crazy, weird things that I wonder about. And then when they realized like there's no limit on this, the juices just started flowing. And so some of my personal favorites were consumption of food in a lifetime, Aztecs, lots of space stuff like aliens and Area 51, and my all-time personal favorite was pig's body odor. So no one chose that for their tea set. I was a little bit disappointed, but I thought that was a really interesting thing to wonder about. And since then, I've been wondering about it. So students then spent 2 days researching one topic. They're working in either groups of 2 or 3. The groups of 2 are making 2 teacups, and 2 saucers, and the groups of 3 are making 1 teacup, 1 teapot, and 2 saucers. That's 4 things. So their challenge was, how do you take what you just researched and put it onto this tea set? So we talked about when you have tea with someone, it's a social thing, right? You don't say, hey, you want to go grab coffee and then stare at the window while you quietly sit next to each other. You grab coffee and then you talk about things. So these tea sets are a way to start a conversation in that already kind of social setting. So the students were so excited to do this and to just be imaginative and wonder about things that they don't necessarily get to wonder about, right? Like they don't get to feed that curiosity all the time, and especially in 5th grade when they're anxious about middle school. It's really fun to see them work with the students. I mean, at one point, one student had this like their topic is what came first, the chicken or the egg. So they had this tea cup and it was a broken egg, and then one of the students was like, well, let's have chicken feet coming out of it. So it's this broken teacup with chicken feet coming out of it. So it's really cool to see them just bounce these ideas off their head, and they come into class, and I'm out of school, right? So we've been practicing for a sub, and they run in and they're grabbing things of clay, and they don't ask questions about where things are. There's this kind of like confidence that they have when they're really excited to work on this project. And they need me for problems, so to speak, but they don't need me for that support in the finding things like I notice that they do when they're not as excited to do some of my art projects. And then so I'm doing ceramics with the high school. We call it upper school. The upper school, and the first project they did was they had to go recycle dumpster diving and find a recycled vessel, and then they had to research something from nature and recreate in their own way this recycled vessel with the motif of nature on it. And then right now they're doing some research on artists and then creating pieces based on the artist. And also in 1st and 2nd grade right now, they have a community fair coming up, and they are learning about animals. So we are doing a collaborative piece with their teacher where they do research and, like look at pictures in class, and then they come into the art room and we are sculpting different animals out of clay.
So we didn't want to assume anything about our audience. When I first started coming to NCECA, I knew very little about clay. So if you're just starting off or looking to, begin a clay curriculum, we just want to recommend a few materials. We both kind of lean towards the Laguna low fire clay. I use a lot of teachers' palette glazes. You can mix them. It's pretty easy to fire and consistent. I also use some crystal glazes. I've had success with these brands. So just like if you're looking to start somewhere and you're not sure, this is a pretty helpful slide. So right now we have a little bit of time for questions, and in the aisle is a microphone. So if you guys have any questions or comments for either of us, this is a great time. Okay. Okay.
Just curious as to some of the projects' time frame.
Yeah.
How long, and do you need every other day? Is it block period?
Yeah.
Some of these are pretty intense
Yes.
projects.
That's a great question. I see my students, I teach like 26 or 27 classes a week. I see each class for 40 minutes once a week. And my other school I work at, I'm only there one day a week. So I have to, just do what I can in that one day. So for me, at one of my schools, I have an open studio time at the end of the day where the students can come and work on a project and kind of work independently, get extra help. But that's a great question. Timing with clay is so difficult.
Yeah, so my schedule is really different. We're on a 6-day cycle, and for high school and middle school, it's a block. So I get 80 minutes sometimes once a week with 7th grade. Sometimes I get 120 minutes with them twice a week. And then I see in that 6-day cycle all my lower school students for 40 minutes twice a week. And then it's the same for high school as middle school. So what I do a lot of times with my lower school is I do our planning on one period, our building in 2 or 3 periods, and then our glazing in 1 period. And with middle school, it's definitely a little bit longer depending on how the days fall in the week. And because I made them take care of it all themselves.
Yeah, like the totem poles took months, but was worth it. I mean, it's kind of that thing when you're a teacher, you want to, pack in as much in a year as possible. And I just try to look at it as well. They'll have me for 7 years, and we'll get it in at some point. Yes, Dr. Bay.
Use the microphone.
With regards to collaboration, do you feel like you ever have issues with ownership of what goes home and to who? Could you speak to that?
Another excellent question. I'm really sensitive to that. When we would teach, Saturday art workshops in undergrad, that was something I remember learning the hard way. Students were upset, and I want to take this. No, I want to take this. So now when I do anything collaborative, I make sure there's a product for both students going home. We just finished like a 3D printing design lesson, and they worked together to make blueprints and elevation drawings. And I was like, oh, I did it again. So I told them, I said, if you don't know who's going to take it, we'll trace it, we'll make another one, because they are proud of this and they worked hard on it, and they should I feel like they should get to take something home. But at the same time, sometimes we're just making these projects and focusing on the process, and we can kind of give up the product. So I think it depends.
Yeah, I agree. I think it depends. I think if the whole class is not going to take anything home, that's different. But if there is like one product and you're working in a group, it's hard for that other student who's gone through all the pain and all the accomplishment with that other student not to take something home. So I think it's something that you do as a teacher have to be very sensitive of and navigate. Your students. Like I know which students will be fine just going through, they're just in it for the process and they don't care about the product. And then I have other students who could totally skip the process and just the art gods plop something in their hands and they would be happy. So your students as well. Anyone else? Okay. Oh, I was going to say thank you.
So So we just want to say thank you. All of the resources we shared with you are on the NCECA app. So the worksheets and things we have uploaded, you can just use them. And if you have any further questions or want to come talk to us, we'll be up here. And Lily, closing remarks?
Yeah, I was just going to like sum everything up, I guess, in true teacher fashion. So basically why we did this was because we have, like I said before, we have this passion for clay and collaboration. And I know how hard it is sometimes to sit down when, like, I have 9 preps, so it's hard for me to sit down and be like, I have to think of another lesson. So for me, you know, I told you I listened to this podcast. For me, I have to pull something in it that is important to me so that I can have that energy to teach my students. And I think that we both bring our loves into the classroom, and our students recognize that. And I think another thing that we really wanted to get out of this talk was collaboration can be defined in so many different ways. And one of the things that we're both currently working on in the schools is how to collaborate more with other teachers and how to get students to feel comfortable collaborating with each other, which is why all my like big collaboration projects came later in the year so that they could build those relationships not only with students but with me, and then feel comfortable making art projects. So yeah, we just wanted to thank you for coming, and yeah, if you have any questions.